Good morning and welcome to this week's Wednesday Reflection. Today we begin a look at one of the Bible's finest written stories, the vast saga of the life of Samuel, Saul, and David. This magnificent history presents the greatest portrayals of human characters in the ancient world. The lectionary text that has been chosen to begin this epic tale chooses to leave out the first 3 verses of this chapter in 1 Samuel. As one commentary pointed out, these verses are crucial if we are to truly understand who Samuel was. So I begin by sharing with you the reading from 1 Samuel, including those verses. When Samuel grew old, he was appointed as sons as Israel's leaders. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. And they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." But when they said this, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It's not you that they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king, as they have done from the day I brought them out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know that what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights." Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." But the people refused to listen to Samuel. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles." And so we have heard the prophet Samuel has grown old in the service of Israel, a service that began decades before at the tiny shrine of Shiloh, where Samuel had been left by his mother. It was here that he was raised up by the priest Eli and was called by God, or in Old Testament language, by Yahweh, in a very famous late-night visitation. Some commentaries actually suggest that this wasn't a call at all, but an absolute fury against Eli because he had failed to restrain his squandering sons. Yahweh does not tell Samuel to do anything in that exchange, but what Samuel obviously learns from Yahweh's rage is that it's directed towards anyone who will not toe the divine line. It is that Yahweh whom Samuel will represent through his prophetic career. I read further that Samuel also finds himself in a similar position to Eli with regard to his own sons. They too are foul boys, refusing to follow in the holy ways of their father, turning instead to cash gained through bribes and the perversion of justice. The only difference, however, is that Samuel has made his boys judges over the people of Beersheba in the far southern deserts of the land. It seems pretty clear that Samuel has sent them away to learn and fully expects them to take over his judgeship, when he is no longer capable of it. But as we heard, the people of Beersheba are having none of it. Samuel's sons are nothing more than corruption in the city, and so the citizens want them removed and replaced by a king. The judgeship of Israel had lasted some 200 years and had relied on the charismatic choice of one person or another, picked by Yahweh. Samuel had obviously imagined that his sons would succeed him, But it appears at this time he is quite wrong. This did not make Samuel too happy. I wonder why Samuel was so displeased at the request for a king. Certainly there would be the religious reply that Samuel would be thinking, which is that Yahweh is the only king and no earthly king need apply. Maybe, though, there is more at stake to Samuel. If he were to make a king for them, then what about his sons? They would be dispensed from their current roles, and any hope that Samuel had of them carrying on in his dynasty in Israel, well, that would end. So when Samuel prays to Yahweh, he must have been completely shocked when he hears from his God that he should in fact make them a king. In fact, Yahweh is relentless with Samuel about his stating that he must crown someone as king. A few verses past what we hear today, Samuel actually continues to refuse to do as he's been told to do. Eventually, though, a king will be appointed. Israel has just wanted to be like other nations. You know, it reminds me of when our kids are young and one of the kids on the street has just gotten a new bike or a new scooter or a new video game, and all the other kids want it too because, well, so-and-so has it. Why does God tell Samuel to go ahead and give them a king anyway? And perhaps more importantly, how can we distinguish when we or someone else is speaking from their own self-interest or opposed to speaking for God? The people's demand for a king did not seem unreasonable. Someone needs to protect them from the Philistines, and Samuel's sons are clearly not fit to rule. They want someone to speak with authority, to lead, to organize. Speaking in the name of God provides power. They want someone to use this power on their behalf. We can recognize this desire for power that brings certainty and security, but at the same time, we distrust those who claim to have all the answers. We increasingly turn away from experts and instead rely on networks of friends and neighbors. Well, we want someone to speak prophetically, to speak with authority. We also suspect those who claim to do so. We have an ambivalent relationship with power, and truth is no longer absolute, no longer possessed by a central authority. It is instead debatable, relative, and up for grabs, even in the church sometimes. Let's return, though, for a minute to the question of kingship for Israel. Hereditary rule doesn't seem to work well for Israel. Eli is mostly a good priest, but his sons are not. Samuel is one of the greatest prophets and judges, but his sons, well, they're corrupt. So the people demand a king. Despite the just demonstrated problems with hereditary rule, and after describing all the problems kings will bring, God gives them one. The next 4 kings of Israel, although they have their good points, are as Samuel predicts. Saul is mostly a poor king, and his son dies with him. David, well, he has his highs and lows and fights a civil war against his son. His other son, Solomon, succeeds him, and his son, Rehoboam, fumbles the kingship so badly that the nation splits in 2. And yet we also see Saul uniting the Israelites in common defense, something they couldn't seem to manage without him. And in many ways, the nation prospered under its kings. So where are we left? Does God like kings or not? Where's the good news in this passage? Well, maybe it's simply this: neither prophets nor kings are perfect. What matters is our relationship to God. Prophets and kings benefit the people when they listen to God. And when they turn to self-interest, well, they do not. God gives the people a king, not because kings are any better than prophets, but because the people demand it. Just as we are called to listen to God, well, God listens to the people in good times and bad. And God doesn't necessarily take sides. What does God desire? Well, justice, kindness, humility. If in seeking justice, kindness, and humility, we end up on the opposite side of an issue, that doesn't mean that God is absent. It doesn't mean one of us is wrong. Maybe it means that God is there between us. And so, like those kids in Israel who asked God to give them what they want, I leave you this morning to think of a time when you wanted something that everyone else had. The Israelites wanted a king, and they eventually got the king. And well, it didn't work out so well for them. I leave you with that to ponder this week, as we've heard our first reading from 1 Samuel. Have a great week. Amen.